She slapped the CEO by mistake on New Year's Eve, and he smiled and said, "I was hoping for a kiss." She never meant to hit him. At an elegant New Year's Eve gala, surrounded by champagne, music, and couples counting down to midnight, one sudden movement becomes a shocking mistake. A slap loud enough to silence the room. Everyone freezes. She expects anger, security, public humiliation. Instead, the CEO smiles. Leaning closer, calm and unoffended, he murmurs with quiet amusement, "It's New Year's Eve. I was hoping for a kiss at midnight." What should have ended her night becomes the beginning of something dangerous and unexpected. As the seconds drift closer to 12, stolen glances turn into tension, and a simple tradition becomes a choice that could change both their lives forever. Because on New Year's Eve, some mistakes aren't accidents, they're fate, waiting for the clock to strike. Before we continue, if you enjoy touching and inspiring stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Now let's get back to the story. "Don't touch me." The words cracked through the ballroom like a dropped glass. A second later, the sound followed, sharp, unmistakable, skin against skin, a slap loud enough to turn champagne into still water and laughter into stunned air. Every face at the New Year's Eve gala pivoted toward the center of the room. Mila Ashford stood frozen, her right hand suspended mid-air, fingers trembling as if they no longer belonged to her. The music stuttered to a halt. A string of fairy lights flickered once above the marble floor. Someone gasped. Someone else whispered a name, Ethan Reeves, CEO, host. The man whose face filled business magazines and airport billboards, the man whose presence alone bent rooms into attention. Mila's breath caught painfully in her chest. She hadn't meant to hit him. The moment replayed itself in her mind, cruel and fast. She'd turned suddenly, startled by a hand at her elbow, too firm, too familiar, a stranger's grip she'd mistaken for something else, something unwanted. Her body reacted before her thoughts could catch up, defend, protect, move. Her palm met his cheek. Now she waited for the consequences, security rushing in. A sharp reprimand, her name spoken with disbelief, then contempt. A quiet escort out the side door, heels clicking in shame while phones lifted to capture the fall of a nobody who dared to strike a powerful man. Mila swallowed. The room held its breath. Ethan Reeves did not raise his voice. He did not step back. He smiled. It wasn't mocking, it wasn't cruel. It was calm, measured, almost amused, as he leaned slightly closer, his blue-gray eyes steady on hers. "It's New Year's Eve," he said softly, just loud enough for her to hear. "I was hoping for a kiss at midnight." A ripple moved through the crowd, confusion, laughter that didn't quite land, whispers sliding along silk gowns and tailored sleeves. Mila's heart slammed so hard she thought it might betray her and burst straight through the delicate silver fabric of her dress. I'm so sorry," she whispered, finally finding her voice. "I thought you were someone else." Ethan touched his cheek, as if assessing damage that clearly wasn't there. "Then I suppose I should be grateful," he said lightly. "You have excellent instincts." A few people chuckled now. The tension loosened by a thread. Mila wanted to disappear. She clutched the small silver locket at her collarbone. An old thing. Slightly worn, its hinge softened by years of use. It had belonged to her grandmother, passed down with a simple rule. Wear this when you need courage, or when you forget who you are. Right now, she needed both. "I didn't mean to cause a scene," Mila said, her cheeks burning. "Scenes are overrated," Ethan replied. "Moments are better." He glanced around, taking in the curious onlookers. With a subtle lift of his hand, the orchestra resumed, easing back into a low, forgiving melody. Conversations restarted, though the room still leaned in their direction. He gestured toward a nearby table. "May I?" She hesitated. Every instinct told her to run. Yet something steadier, quieter, held her in place. They moved together to a tall table draped in white linen. A waiter appeared instantly, as if summoned by Ethan's presence alone. "Champagne?" the waiter asked. Mila shook her head too quickly. "Water, please." Ethan nodded. "Same, and something to eat. She looks like she forgot to." Mila blinked at him. "I didn't forget." "Everyone does tonight," he said gently. Moments later, a small plate appeared. Delicate slices of pear and cheese arranged like a promise. Mila hadn't realized how tight her body had been until she took a bite. Sweetness grounded her. The simple act of chewing steadied her hands. "Better?" Ethan asked. She nodded, embarrassed. "Thank you." They stood side by side, close enough to feel each other's presence without touching. Mila became acutely aware of the room again, the couples laughing, the clock projected high on the wall. Counting down the final minutes of the year. "So," Ethan said, casual as if she hadn't just struck him in front of half the city. "Do you slap all strangers, or was I special?" A laugh escaped her before she could stop it, quick, surprised. She covered her mouth. "And I promise I'm not violent," she said. "Just jumpy." "Understandable," he replied. "Crowded rooms do that." She glanced at him then, really looked. The confident line of his shoulders, the quiet patience in his eyes. No trace of anger, no hunger for embarrassment or power. "Why aren't you upset?" she asked. He considered her. "Because intent matters." Her fingers curled around the locket again. Before she could respond, a woman approached, tall, elegant, her smile too precise. "Ethan," the woman said, "the board is asking questions." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I'll be there." The woman's gaze slid to Mila, cool and curious. "And who is this?" Ethan didn't hesitate. "Someone who reminded me to pay attention." The woman's lips thinned. She nodded once and walked away. Mila shifted uncomfortably. "I should go. I've already caused enough trouble." Ethan turned fully toward her now. "Stay." The word wasn't a command. It was an invitation. The clock chimed softly. 10 minutes to midnight. Across the room, couples gathered closer. Hands linked. Laughter softened into anticipation. Ethan glanced at the locket. "Is it important?" She hesitated. "It belonged to my grandmother. She believed some moments choose us." He smiled slowly. "She sounds wise." The countdown clock ticked louder. Mila felt something tightening in her chest. Not fear this time, but possibility. And as the seconds slid closer to midnight, Ethan leaned in just enough to be heard over the music and murmured, "So tell me, Mila Ashford, if the clock strikes 12, do you still think this night was a mistake?" She opened her mouth to answer. The lights dimmed, and the room began to count down. 10. It was 10. The word rolled through the ballroom, rich and echoing, as if the walls themselves had decided to join the countdown. Mila felt the number land in her chest. Her fingers tightened around the silver locket, thumb rubbing the worn engraving the way her grandmother used to do before making a brave choice. 9! Couples shifted closer. A woman laughed too loudly somewhere behind them. A man cleared his throat, suddenly emotional. Ethan didn't move. He didn't reach for Mila. He didn't step away, either. He simply stood there, present, as though whatever came next would be faced squarely. 8. Mila's mind raced. Though her body stayed strangely calm, she'd come to the gala as a favor, a last-minute ticket from a catering friend who'd begged her to fill a seat so the table wouldn't look empty. She wasn't supposed to be noticed. She certainly wasn't supposed to be standing inches from the host, the CEO, everyone admired from a safe distance. 7. She glanced at him. Up close, his calm felt earned, not rehearsed. There was something almost kind in the way he waited. 6. "You don't have to," she said quickly, barely louder than the music. "I don't want to put you in an awkward position." Ethan smiled, small and genuine. "Mila, my position survives worse things than moments." 5. A pop of champagne corks sounded like fireworks. Someone cheered prematurely and earned a few laughs. 4. Mila took a breath. "People are watching." "Yes," Ethan said, "they always are." 3. She thought of her grandmother again. "Dignity isn't about hiding," she used to say. "It's about choosing who sees you." 2. Ethan lowered his voice. "If you'd rather shake hands at midnight, I'll survive that, too." Despite herself, Mila smiled. "That might be the most awkward option. Then let's avoid it." 1. The room erupted. "Happy New Year!" Confetti burst from the balcony. Glasses clinked. Music swelled. Somewhere, someone cried openly and didn't bother wiping their eyes. Ethan leaned in, slowly, deliberately, giving her every chance to step away. Mila didn't. The kiss was brief, soft, nothing dramatic, just a gentle meeting of lips, steady and respectful, like punctuation at the end of a sentence that had been waiting to finish itself. Applause rippled through the room. Some of it sincere, some of it surprised. A few phones lifted. Mila felt her cheeks warm, but didn't regret a single second. When they stepped apart, Ethan searched her face. "Still a mistake?" She shook her head. "No." They both laughed then, quiet, shared, real. A small victory tucked into the roar of celebration. A waiter passed with trays of food, the smell of warm bread cutting through the perfume and champagne. Ethan gestured toward a quieter corner near the windows. "Come sit with me," he said, "before the night turns into rumors." She followed, heels clicking softly, heart still racing. They settled at a small table, where plates of roasted vegetables and simple pasta waited. Comforting. Grounding, human. Mila twirled her fork, then paused. "You realize this will be talked about." Ethan took a bite, unfazed. "Most things worth doing are." She studied him. "You don't mind the gossip?" "I mind injustice," he replied. "Gossip usually burns itself out." Across the room, the elegant woman from earlier watched them with an expression that hovered between curiosity and calculation. She leaned toward another guest, whispering behind a lifted glass. Mila noticed. Her stomach tightened. "Who is she?" Mila asked quietly. Ethan followed her gaze. "My cousin, Lydia. She's very good at remembering moments, creatively." Mila gave a soft, nervous laugh. "That sounds dangerous." "It can be," he admitted. But truth has a way of catching up. A sudden clatter interrupted them. A waiter tripped nearby, sending a roll skidding across the floor. A small child darted after it, triumphant. "Victory bread," the child announced, holding it high. Mila laughed, the sound easing something tight inside her. Ethan smiled, shaking his head. "See," he said, "the universe approves." As the night wore on, the crowd thinned. Conversations deepened. Mila felt herself relax, the locket warm against her skin. "I should thank you," she said, "for not turning that moment into something ugly." Ethan met her gaze. "Thank you for trusting me with it." They stood then, drifting back toward the center of the room. The music softened, couples swaying. From across the ballroom, Lydia lifted her phone, the screen glowing briefly. Mila caught the motion. Her smile faded. "Ethan," she murmured. "She's recording." His expression shifted, not alarmed, but thoughtful. Let her. Before Mila could ask what he meant, Lydia's phone buzzed. A notification flashed on several screens nearby. A photo. The slap. The kiss. Captioned with a single line that spread like a spark. "CEO loses control at midnight." Mila's breath caught. Ethan read it too. He reached for Mila's hand. Steady and certain, as murmurs began to rise around them. "Looks like," he said calmly, "the year just got interesting." And the whispers grew louder. The whispers didn't rush. They crept. They moved the way fog does, slowly at first, then everywhere at once, curling around tables, sliding past laughter, settling into glances that lingered a beat too long. Mila felt it before she heard it. A shift in posture, a pause mid-sentence, the subtle way conversations bent toward them, pretending not to. She kept her chin lifted, though her pulse thudded in her ears. Ethan didn't let go of her hand. "Do you want to leave?" he asked quietly. Mila hesitated. Running would be easy, familiar, safe in the short term, but something about this night had already broken her usual patterns. "No," she said. "I don't want my first memory of the year to be hiding." A flicker of approval crossed his face. "Good." They moved toward the terrace doors, away from the densest cluster of guests. The night air met them with a gentle chill, city lights blinking like patient witnesses. A small table waited outside, already set with coffee cups and a plate of tiny pastries dusted with sugar. Someone had thought of comfort amid celebration. Mila wrapped her hands around a warm mug, letting the heat seep into her palms. "I didn't plan to be anyone's headline tonight." Ethan smiled faintly. "Most headlines start that way." She took a sip. "Your cousin doesn't like me." "She doesn't like uncertainty," he replied. "And she hates when she can't control a story." Mila glanced back through the glass. Lydia stood near the bar now, phone tucked away, her face animated as she spoke to a small group. "I don't belong in your world," Mila said softly. Ethan turned toward her fully. "You belong wherever you stand with honesty." The words settled between them, heavier than they sounded. A gust of wind lifted Mila's hair. She tucked it back, fingers brushing the locket. "My grandmother used to say," Mila began, then stopped, embarrassed. "I'm listening," Ethan said. "She said reputation is like china," Mila continued. "People assume it's fragile, but if it's real, it survives being dropped." Ethan chuckled. "I like her already." A burst of laughter drifted from inside. Someone spilled a drink. A man apologized too dramatically. Life went on. "Can I ask you something?" Mila said. "Please." "Why me?" She met his eyes, steady, despite the vulnerability in her voice. "You could have brushed me off, turned the moment into a joke at my expense." Ethan considered the question longer than she expected. "Because you didn't try to save yourself by shrinking," he said. "You stood there. You owned the moment. That's rare." Mila let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The terrace door opened suddenly. "Ethan!" a man called out, mid-40s, flushed with drink and enthusiasm. "There you are!" "Great party, really unforgettable." "Mark," Ethan said politely. Mark's gaze flicked to Mila. His smile widened. "Ah, the famous midnight surprise." Mila stiffened. Ethan's tone cooled by a degree. "Mila Ashford, Mark is one of our investors." Mark nodded, clearly amused. "Bold move." Mila forced a small smile. "It wasn't a move," Mark laughed. "Isn't everything?" Before the moment could sour further, a waiter appeared, nearly colliding with Mark, as he pushed through the door with a tray of soup cups. Sorry, excuse me," the waiter stammered, managing to save the tray but sloshing soup perilously close to Mark's jacket. Mila bit back a smile. Ethan didn't bother hiding his. "Careful," Ethan said mildly. "That jacket costs more than my first car." The waiter's eyes widened in horror. "I'm so sorry, sir." Mark waved it off, suddenly less interested in conversation. "No harm done. I'll, see you inside." When he was gone, Mila laughed, light, relieved, real. "Thank you," she said to Ethan. "For that." "For soup-based rescues?" he asked. "Any time." They shared the soup, simple and warm, standing shoulder to shoulder. The act felt intimate in its ordinariness. Inside, Lydia watched from across the room, her expression unreadable. Mila noticed. "She's still watching." "Yes," Ethan said calmly, "and waiting." "For what?" "For you to disappear." Mila straightened. "Then I won't." Ethan looked at her with something like admiration, A phone buzzed in Mila's clutch. She frowned, checking the screen. A message from an unknown number. "You don't know what you've stepped into." Her stomach dropped. She showed Ethan, his jaw tightened. "Lydia? Are you sure?" "She's subtle when she wants to be kind," he said. "This isn't that." Mila slipped the phone away, fingers brushing the locket again. "I don't want to be a problem," she said quietly. Ethan took her hand once more, firm and grounding. "You're not the problem." Music swelled inside again, louder now. A new song. Slower. Ethan tilted his head toward the door. "Dance with me." "Now?" Mila asked. "Yes, right when people are deciding what to think." Her heart raced. This wasn't just romance. This was a choice. Before she could answer, Lydia stepped onto the terrace, smile polished and eyes sharp. "There you are," Lydia said sweetly. "Ethan, the press just called." Mila's breath caught. "What did they say?" Ethan asked. Lydia's gaze flicked to Mila. "They want a statement about your guest." Silence stretched. Ethan didn't look away from Mila. "Tell them," he said evenly, "that I'll speak for myself." Lydia's smile faltered. "And tell them," he added, "to wait." Mila felt the weight of the night settle fully onto her shoulders, because whatever came next would no longer be a whisper. It would be public. And the year had only just begun. The word press hung in the night air like a held breath. Mila felt it settle behind her ribs, heavy and real. She didn't move closer to Ethan. She didn't step away either. She stood exactly where she was, shoulders squared, chin lifted, the way her grandmother had taught her to stand when the room tried to decide her worth. Lydia folded her hands neatly in front of her, posture flawless. "They're asking whether this was a publicity stunt," she said smoothly, "or a lapse in judgment." Mila noticed how carefully Lydia avoided using her name. Ethan's voice stayed calm. "And you told them?" "That you'd respond when ready," Lydia said. "But silence breeds stories." "So does speaking too soon," Ethan replied. A faint smile tugged at Lydia's lips, the kind that looked kind from a distance. "Just remember who this affects." Mila felt the glance without Lydia turning her head. "I'm well aware," Ethan said. "Thank you." Lydia paused, clearly expecting more. When none came, she nodded once and went back inside, heels clicking decisively. The terrace felt quieter after she left, as if the night itself was listening. "I'm sorry," Mila said. The words came automatically, a reflex she hated. "This is already becoming complicated." Ethan turned toward her. "It was complicated before you arrived?" She studied his face, searching for regret. She didn't find any. "Come," he said, nodding toward a small cafe table tucked into the corner of the terrace, half shielded by a potted olive tree. "Sit. The air's colder than it looks." They sat. A waiter reappeared, the same one from before. Cheeks still pink with effort. "Can I bring you anything else?" he asked. "Tea," Mila said, "if you have it." Ethan smiled. "2 teas, and whatever pastry you're most proud of." The waiter beamed. "On it." Mila exhaled slowly. "You have a way of making people feel seen." Ethan shrugged lightly. "I spent a long time feeling invisible in crowded rooms." That surprised her. "You?" "Yes," he said simply. The tea arrived, chamomile, steaming, and fragrant, along with a small plate holding 2 modest slices of honey cake. Mila took a bite and closed her eyes briefly, savoring the sweetness. "This tastes like something made by hand," she said. "It was," the waiter said proudly before retreating. They ate in companionable quiet for a moment. The cake grounded Mila, reminded her of kitchens and laughter and ordinary evenings that didn't end up on screens. "May I ask what you do?" Ethan said gently. She wiped her fingers on a napkin. "I restore old books, family collections, small libraries. I fix what time tries to erase." His eyebrows lifted. "That feels fitting," she smiled. "I like things that last. From inside, applause rose suddenly. Someone had started a toast. Glasses clinked. Life continued, oblivious and relentless. Ethan glanced at his watch. I'll need to make a statement before this turns into speculation, dressed as truth. Mila's chest tightened. About me? About us, he said. Her heart stumbled. There is no us, not really. There can be, he said softly, if you want it. She looked down at the locket, thumb brushing its worn edge. This world can be cruel. So can small ones, Ethan replied. The difference is visibility. She laughed quietly. You make it sound like a trade? It is, he admitted, and you don't owe me anything. They stood together as the music inside swelled again. Ethan offered his arm, not possessive, just present. Walk with me, he said, if you're comfortable. She took it. As they entered the ballroom, the temperature shifted. Warmer. Brighter, louder. Conversations faltered again, then resumed with forced enthusiasm. A woman near the bar whispered too loudly, "She's very young." Mila didn't flinch. She focused on the steady rhythm of her steps. They stopped near the center, where the microphone stood waiting. Ethan leaned close. Whatever happens next, remember this. You did nothing wrong. She nodded, swallowing. Before he could step forward, a man intercepted them. Older, silver-haired, wearing a smile that felt practiced. "Ethan," the man said. A word. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Not now, Charles." Charles glanced at Mila. "This is a sensitive time for the company." Mila spoke before Ethan could respond. "Then I'll step away." "No," Ethan said firmly. "You won't." Charles raised an eyebrow. "Public opinion matters." "So does integrity," Ethan replied, "and mine isn't for negotiation." A small murmur rippled through the crowd. Charles sighed. "Very well." As he walked away, Mila let out a shaky breath. That was intense. Ethan smiled slightly. He's harmless when confronted. They shared a small laugh, a breath of relief in the pressure. Ethan took the microphone. The room quieted. "My friends," he began, "thank you for celebrating tonight. Before the year carries us forward, there's something I'd like to say." Mila felt every eye shift toward her. "This evening," Ethan continued, "included a moment that surprised all of us, including me." A few nervous chuckles. "I won't apologize for it," he said, "because it was honest, and because the woman standing beside me deserves respect." "Not speculation." Mila's throat tightened. "She is not a prop," he went on. "She is not a headline. She is a person who acted with instinct and courage. I stand by her." The room was silent now. Ethan lowered the microphone and turned to Mila. "Is that all right with you?" She nodded, tears prickling but not falling. Applause broke out, tentative at first, then stronger. From across the room Lydia watched, her expression unreadable. Mila felt something shift. Not victory, but grounding. And then Lydia's phone buzzed again. Her face changed. She looked up sharply, locking eyes with Ethan. Mila's own phone vibrated a second later. Another message: "If you think this ends tonight, you're wrong." Mila closed her eyes briefly, because the statement had been made. But the story wasn't finished, not even close. Morning arrived without apology. Gray light slipped through the narrow kitchen window of Mila's apartment, settling on stacks of old books, spools of thread, and the small wooden press she used to mend broken spines. The world looked exactly the same as it had the night before. Quiet, modest, familiar, and yet everything felt different. Mila stood barefoot on the cool floor, kettle humming softly on the stove. She wore an oversized sweater, sleeves pushed up, hair loosely tied. The silver locket rested against her collarbone, as it always did when she needed steadiness. Her phone lay face down on the table. She didn't have to look to know it had been busy. When the kettle clicked off, she poured water into a mug and dropped in a tea bag. Watching the color bloom slowly. Ordinary rituals mattered today. They reminded her that she still belonged to herself. She finally picked up the phone. Notifications stacked like fallen dominoes. Messages from friends she hadn't spoken to in years. Missed calls from an unknown number. A news alert with a photo she recognized too well. Ethan at the microphone. Her beside him, chin lifted, eyes steady. CEO defends mystery woman after gala incident. Mila exhaled slowly and set the phone back down. A knock sounded at the door. She froze. Another knock, gentler this time. "Mila?" a voice called. "It's Mrs. Alvarez from downstairs." Relief washed through her. Mila opened the door to find her neighbor holding a small plate covered with foil. "I saw you come in late," Mrs. Alvarez said warmly. "And then I saw you on my television." Mila winced. "I'm sorry." Mrs. Alvarez waved a hand. "Nonsense. You looked beautiful. Brave, too." She lifted the foil. "I made empanadas." "Courage needs food." Mila laughed, the sound surprising her with its ease. "Thank you. Please come in." They sat at the small kitchen table, sharing the empanadas while the tea cooled. Mrs. Alvarez watched Mila with kind curiosity. "So," she said, "is he as serious as he looks?" Mila smiled faintly. "Yes and no. He laughs when he thinks no one's paying attention." Mrs. Alvarez nodded approvingly. "The good ones always do." After she left, Mila cleaned up slowly, then sat with her hands folded around her mug. The quiet pressed in again. Her phone buzzed. This time, she answered. "Good morning," Ethan's voice said. Calm, steady. "I hope I'm not calling too early." "No," Mila said. "I was awake." "I thought you might be," he replied gently. "How are you holding up?" She glanced at the locket. "I've had worse mornings, and better." A soft chuckle. "Fair." They spoke for a moment about nothing important. The weather? A bakery he liked, the way the city felt different before noon. It felt intentional, as if he were giving her space to breathe before anything heavier. "There's something I should tell you," Ethan said eventually. Mila straightened. "Okay." "My board isn't pleased," he said. "They're not angry. Just alert." She closed her eyes briefly. "I don't want to cause trouble." "You're not," he said firmly. "But there's more." She waited. "My cousin has been busy," Ethan continued. "She's been reaching out to people who enjoy adding shadows to light." Mila's stomach tightened. "About me?" "Yes," he admitted. "About your background, your work. She's trying to find a weakness." Mila laughed softly, though there was no humor in it. "She'll be disappointed." "I think so," Ethan said. "But she may stir enough noise to be exhausting." A pause. "I don't expect you to stay in this," he added. "You can step away at any point." "Quietly. I'll make sure of it." Mila looked around her apartment. The books, the press, the small life she'd built carefully. "Ethan," she said, choosing her words, "I've spent years fixing things that other people thought weren't worth saving. I don't step away easily." He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was warmer. "Then may I invite you to lunch?" "Publicly?" she asked. "Yes," he said. "Openly, with witnesses and soup." She smiled despite herself. "Nay, soup? I've learned it's our good luck charm." "All right," she said. "Lunch." They met at a small cafe tucked between a florist and a tailor, unpretentious. Sunlit, the kind of place where nobody rushed you out. A few heads turned when they walked in, but no one reached for a phone. They ordered soup and bread, simple and comforting. Mila noticed how Ethan waited for her before taking his first bite. "So," he said, "tell me about the book that matters most to you." She brightened. "It's a journal, no famous author, just a woman who wrote every day for 40 years. Her family almost threw it out." "Almost," Ethan echoed. "I convinced them not to," Mila said. "Some stories don't ask for attention. They ask for care." He studied her. "You're very sure of who you are?" She shook her head. "I'm sure of what I value." Outside the cafe window, a woman slowed, peering in. She whispered to her companion, pointing subtly. Mila noticed. Ethan noticed too. He leaned forward. "Would it help if I said something?" She considered. then shook her head. No, let them wonder. A small victory bloomed in her chest. As they stood to leave, Ethan reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out something small. A return, he said, placing it in her hand. It was her locket. Mila gasped. How did you— It fell when you hugged Mrs. Alvarez goodbye, he said with a grin. She chased me down the hall. Mila laughed, relief washing over her as she clasped it around her neck again. That evening, as she sat alone with a simple dinner and the radio playing softly, her phone buzzed once more. A link. She opened it. An article, unsigned. Who is Mila Ashford? Questions the CEO won't answer. At the bottom, a comment glowed. Newly posted. Some books are better left closed. Mila's fingers stilled on the screen, because this time the story wasn't just watching her, it was coming for her. The comment stayed with her longer than the article itself. Some books are better left closed. Mila read it again the next morning while spreading butter on toast. The radio murmuring low news in the background. The words felt pointed, not random, as if someone had leaned close enough to whisper. She set the phone down and finished her breakfast slowly, forcing herself not to rush. Toast, tea, the locket cool against her skin. Routine, she reminded herself, was a form of resistance. At the restoration studio, the air smelled of paper and glue, familiar and steady. Shelves lined with half-heeled books watched her quietly as she worked. Mila slipped on cotton gloves and opened a leather-bound volume, its spine cracked with age. She had just settled into the careful rhythm of repair when the bell above the door chimed. Mila Ashford, a woman asked. Mila looked up. The woman stood just inside the doorway, mid-40s, well-dressed but not flashy, eyes sharp with professional curiosity. Yes? I'm Caroline Moore, the woman said, offering a polite smile. I write for the Ledger. Mila's hand stilled. I'd like to ask you a few questions, Caroline continued. Off the record, if you prefer. Mila removed her gloves, folded them carefully. I don't give interviews. Caroline nodded, unsurprised. I assumed you might say that. Still, I wanted to meet you. To what end? Mila asked calmly. Caroline glanced around the studio. To see if the story matched the rumors. And? Mila asked. A pause. It doesn't. Mila held her gaze. Then we're done. Caroline hesitated, then nodded. For what it's worth, I think you're being tested. By whom? Mila asked. Caroline smiled faintly. People who confuse silence with weakness. After she left, Mila locked the door and leaned against it for a moment. Heart thudding. The quiet pressed in again, heavier now. Her phone buzzed. Ethan. Are you free for dinner tonight? Somewhere simple. She stared at the message, then typed back. Mila, yes, somewhere quiet. They chose a small neighborhood restaurant with mismatched chairs and handwritten menus. No photographers. No velvet ropes. Just warmth and the sound of dishes clinking. They ordered stew and bread. When it arrived, steaming and fragrant, Mila felt herself relax. I had a visitor today, she said, breaking a piece of bread. Ethan's eyes sharpened. Who? A journalist, she replied. Polite, curious, not cruel. That's rare, he said. She didn't get what she wanted, Mila added. He smiled. Good. They ate in companionable silence for a few moments. Outside, rain tapped softly against the windows. Lydia called a meeting, Ethan said eventually. Family, not the board. Mila looked up. That doesn't sound casual. It isn't, he admitted. She thinks this situation reflects poorly on the family name. Mila nodded. Of course she does. She wants to meet you, he said carefully. Mila's fork paused midair. Why? To assess, Ethan said. To decide how dangerous you are. Mila laughed softly. I restore books, hardly threatening. That's what worries her, Ethan replied. Mila considered, then reached for her glass. All right. All right, he repeated. I'll meet her, Mila said. I won't hide. Ethan studied her, concern and admiration mingling. "You don't owe her anything." "I owe myself clarity," Mila said. "And maybe her, too." The meeting was set for the following afternoon at Lydia's townhouse. Elegant. Old money, every surface polished to reflect control. Lydia greeted Mila with a practiced smile. "Thank you for coming." They sat at a long table laid with tea and delicate sandwiches. Everything felt curated, intentional. "So," Lydia began, folding her hands, "you've caused quite a stir." Mila met her gaze evenly. "I didn't set out to." "Intentions are rarely visible," Lydia replied. "Outcomes are." Mila lifted her teacup. "What outcome concerns you?" Lydia's smile thinned. "Ethan's reputation." "And mine?" Mila asked. Lydia tilted her head. "You had one?" The words were sharp, but Mila didn't flinch. She reached up and touched her locket instead. "I do, Uncle," Mila said. "It just isn't public." Lydia watched the gesture. Sentimental. "Essential," Mila corrected. They spoke for nearly an hour about boundaries, perception, risk. Lydia never raised her voice. Mila never lowered hers. When it was over, Lydia stood. "You're not what I expected." "Neither are you," Mila replied honestly. That evening Ethan called. "How did it go?" "She didn't win," Mila said, "but she didn't lose either." He sighed. "That sounds like Lydia." A pause. "There's something else," Ethan said. "The article you read, it's gaining traction." Mila closed her eyes. "Of course it is." "And there's a rumor attached now," he continued, "about how you got your invitation to the gala." Her stomach dropped. "What are they saying?" "That you weren't a guest," Ethan said quietly. "That you were hired." Silence stretched between them. "That's not true," Mila said, though her voice shook. "I know," Ethan replied, "but rumors don't need truth. They need fuel." Mila stared at the locket in her palm, its surface warm from her skin. "What do we do?" she asked. Ethan didn't answer right away. "We let the truth speak," he said finally. "But it won't be gentle." After they hung up, Mila sat alone at her kitchen table, a simple bowl of soup untouched before her. Her phone buzzed once more, a message from an unknown number. "Tomorrow the truth comes out, whether you like it or not." Mila's spoon stilled mid-air, because this time it wasn't just whispers walking, they were running. The knock came before the alarm. Mila was already awake, lying still beneath her quilt, staring at the pale ceiling as early light traced quiet lines across the room. She'd barely slept. Not from fear, exactly. From anticipation. The kind that hums under the skin, waiting. Another knock. Firmer this time. She slipped on a cardigan, the silver locket cool against her throat, and opened the door. Ethan stood in the hallway, coat on, hair slightly rumpled, holding a paper bag that smelled unmistakably like warm bread. "I didn't want to call," he said softly. "I thought it might be better to arrive with breakfast." Her shoulders loosened despite herself. "That might be the most comforting thing anyone's done all week," he smiled, stepping inside. "I was hoping." They sat at her small kitchen table, unwrapping pastries still warm from the bakery down the street. Mila poured coffee, the familiar routine steadying her hands. For a moment, they ate in silence. Then Ethan spoke. "The rumor is spreading faster than I expected." Mila nodded. "I figured it would." "Someone leaked a version of the guest list," he continued. "Edited." Her jaw tightened. "So now I look like a liar." "Yes," he said plainly, "and like someone who benefits from being underestimated." She met his eyes. "Do you regret defending me?" "No," he said without hesitation. "But I won't pretend this won't cost something." She took a bite of pastry, tasting cinnamon and resolve. "I don't want you paying for my dignity." "You're not a debt," Ethan said. "You're a choice." The words settled slowly, meaning more than they seemed. Her phone buzzed on the table. A new article alert. She didn't open it. "I want to show you something," Mila said instead. She stood and crossed to a small shelf, lifting a worn ledger wrapped carefully in cloth. "My grandmother's journal," she said, "the one I told you about." Ethan rose, joining her. "May I?" She nodded. He opened it gently, eyes scanning the careful handwriting. Dates, small moments, recipes, losses, hope written in quiet ink. She never wanted attention, Mela said, but she believed truth didn't need permission. Ethan closed the journal reverently. "Then maybe it's time yours didn't ask either." They walked together to his car, the city already stirring. People passed with coffee cups and headphones, unaware of how fragile reputations could be. Ethan drove them to his office, not the towering glass building downtown, but a smaller annex overlooking the river. "Fewer eyes," he explained, "more listening." Inside, the conference room was bright. Sunlight bouncing off polished wood, a simple spread waited on the table, soup, bread, fruit, hospitality as quiet armor. The board members arrived one by one. Some nodded to Mela politely, others avoided her gaze. Lydia entered last. She paused when she saw Mela, expression composed but eyes sharp. "So," she said, "you decided to attend?" "Yes," Mela replied evenly. "I thought it best." The meeting began. Questions were asked about the gala, about the invitation, about Mela's work, her background, her intentions. Mela answered calmly, simply. She didn't embellish. She didn't shrink. When the rumor was mentioned, the word hired hanging ugly in the air, Mela felt a familiar heat rise in her chest. Before Ethan could speak, she did. "I wasn't hired," Mela said. "I was invited by a friend who couldn't attend. I paid for my dress, I paid for my ride home, and I've paid for every moment since." Silence followed. Then Lydia leaned forward. "And the friend?" Mela met her gaze. "Is a single mother who works 3 jobs." She didn't deserve to be dragged into this. Lydia's eyes flickered, just for a second. A micro-victory. Ethan placed a hand on the table. "This ends today," he said. "We release the full guest list, unedited. We issue a statement. Together." One board member shifted. "And if the press isn't satisfied, then they'll have to live with that," Ethan replied. "So will we." The meeting ended without applause, but with something steadier. Acceptance. Outside, Lydia caught up to Mela near the elevator. "You're not foolish," Lydia said quietly. "That makes you dangerous." Mela smiled gently. "You're not heartless. That makes you human." Lydia didn't respond. But she didn't argue either. That evening, Ethan and Mela shared a simple dinner at his place, soup again thick and comforting, eaten on the balcony as the river caught the last light of day. "For luck," Ethan said, raising his spoon. "For truth," Mela replied. They laughed softly. As dusk deepened, Ethan's phone buzzed. He read the message, his expression tightening. "What is it?" Mela asked. "The statement went out," he said, and someone responded. He turned the screen toward her. A comment, already gaining traction. If she values dignity so much, let her explain why she really wears that locket. Mela's breath caught. Her fingers flew to the silver chain at her neck, because the locket wasn't just a keepsake. It was proof, and someone else knew it. The river below the balcony moved steadily, unaware of the words glowing on Ethan's phone. Mela stared at the screen, then instinctively closed her fingers around the silver locket at her throat. The metal felt warmer than it should have, as if it, too, understood the moment had arrived. "Who would say that?" Ethan asked quietly. Mela didn't answer right away. She walked back inside, the soft light of the apartment settling around her like a held breath. On the small dining table, their empty bowls sat side by side. Streaked with soup, evidence of comfort that now felt fragile. "I never planned to talk about it," Mela said finally. "Not because I'm ashamed, because it isn't a story meant for noise." Ethan followed her, staying close but not crowding her. "You don't have to tell me if you don't want to." She turned to him. "I do, I just need a moment." She opened the locket. Inside were 2 tiny photographs, edges worn smooth. One was of her grandmother as a young woman, standing proudly in front of a small bookstore, keys in hand. The other was of a man, serious-eyed, kind-faced, holding a baby wrapped in a blanket. "Oh, that's my grandfather," Mila said, "and me." Ethan studied the images, careful and respectful. Why would this matter to anyone? Mila closed the locket gently. Because that bookstore wasn't always hers. She went to the kitchen and put the kettle on again, hands steady despite the weight of memory. Tea first, always tea. "My grandmother worked there for 20 years, Mila continued. She ran the place, organized everything, but it was owned by a prominent family, one with a name people still recognize." Ethan's brow furrowed. "The Reeves family?" Mila nodded. The kettle clicked off. She poured the water, the simple motion anchoring her. "When the owner died, the family tried to sell the store quietly," Mila said. "My grandmother had been promised it would pass to her. It didn't." Ethan's face tightened. "That doesn't sound like my father." "It wasn't," Mila said softly. "It was your uncle, Lydia's father." Silence filled the room. "My grandmother fought," Mila went on. "Not loudly, not publicly. She had proof, contracts, letters. This locket holds copies, reduced photographs she kept close because she didn't trust safes." Ethan sank into a chair slowly. "She won?" "Yes," Mila said. "Eventually. The store became hers, but the family never forgave her for insisting on fairness." "And Lydia knows," Ethan said. More statement than question. "She always has," Mila replied. "That's why the comment scares me, not because the truth is ugly, because it's powerful." Ethan leaned forward, elbows on knees. "If this comes out, it won't just be gossip. It'll reopen something my family buried." "I don't want revenge," Mila said quickly. "I never did. My grandmother didn't either." Ethan looked up at her. "What did she want?" "Recognition," Mila said, "and peace." They sat with that for a long moment. Ethan stood and went to the kitchen. Returning with 2 small plates, leftover bread, a bit of cheese, he set them between them like an offering. "Eat," he said gently. "Big truths land better on full stomachs." Mila smiled faintly and took a bite. The familiar taste steadied her again. "Whatever you choose," Ethan said. "I'll stand with you, but we need to be deliberate." A knock sounded at the door. Both of them froze. Another knock. Precise. Confident. Ethan checked the door camera on his phone. His jaw tightened. "It's Lydia." Mila exhaled slowly. "Of course it is." Ethan opened the door. Lydia stood there, coat immaculate, expression carefully neutral. Her eyes flicked briefly to Mila's locket. "I assume you've seen the comment," Lydia said. "We have," Ethan replied. Lydia stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. "Then you know why I'm here." Mila met her gaze. "To warn us?" "To negotiate," Lydia corrected. They sat at the table, the remains of dinner between them, humble food facing polished ambition. "That locket," Lydia said, nodding toward Mila, "contains more than sentiment." "Yes," Mila said, "it contains truth." Lydia folded her hands. "Truth is flexible." Mila shook her head. "Only when people bend it." Lydia's eyes hardened slightly. "If this becomes public, it damages more than reputations. It damages legacy." "Whose?" Ethan asked. Lydia looked at him. "Ours." "And hers?" he pressed. Lydia hesitated, just long enough. Mila spoke. "My grandmother asked for dignity, not dominance." Lydia stood abruptly. "Then choose dignity quietly." Mila rose as well. "No." The word landed clean and firm. Lydia stared at her, searching for hesitation. She found none. "Then tomorrow," Lydia said coolly, "this stops being a private matter." She left without another word. The door closed with a soft, final click. Ethan turned to Mila. Are you all right? Mila touched the locket again, her voice steady. I am. Her phone buzzed almost immediately. A new alert. Breaking historical dispute linked to Reeves family resurfaces after gala scandal. Mila looked up at Ethan. They're already writing it, she said. Ethan nodded, resolve settling over his features. Then, tomorrow, we stop letting others tell it. Outside, the river kept moving, and the truth, long quiet, had finally begun to rise. Morning came wrapped in headlines. Mila stood at Ethan's kitchen counter, scrolling slowly, deliberately, as if speed might give the words too much power. The kettle whistled softly beside her, waiting. Family legacy questioned. Old promises, new consequences. Who really owned the bookstore? None of the articles used her grandmother's name yet. That, at least, felt like a small mercy. Ethan watched from the table, jacket draped over the chair, tie loosened. He looked tired, but resolute, the kind of tired that comes from choosing a harder right over an easier quiet. Tea? Mila asked. Yes, he said. Strong. She poured the water, the steam fogging the air between them. The act felt ceremonial, grounding them both before the day took its first real bite. They ate toast with honey, simple and shared. No rush, no speeches. This afternoon, Ethan said, breaking the silence, there's a meeting with the foundation board. Not the company, the family foundation. Mila nodded. Lydia will be there. Yes. And your mother? Mila asked gently. Ethan hesitated. She's been silent. Sometimes silence was louder than opposition. They arrived at the foundation building just before noon. It was older than the corporate offices. Stone instead of glass, portraits lining the walls like quiet judges. Mila felt the locket against her chest, heavier now with meaning. In the conference room, the atmosphere was tense, but controlled. Coffee waited on a side table alongside a modest spread of sandwiches and fruit, untouched for now. Lydia sat at the far end, posture perfect. Two trustees whispered to one another. Ethan's mother, Eleanor Reeves, sat near the window, hands folded, eyes thoughtful. When she looked up and saw Mila, something softened. Just a fraction. The meeting began. Lydia spoke first, calm and composed. We are here to address a narrative that threatens to misrepresent our family's history. Mila listened without interruption. Ethan followed. We're here to correct it. Eyes turned. Mila stood slowly. I won't speak about rumors, she said. I'll speak about records. She opened her bag and placed a small folder on the table. Carefully, respectfully. Inside were copies, photographs of contracts, letters signed decades ago. Proof her grandmother had preserved quietly, faithfully. These were kept in my locket, Mila said, touching it lightly, because my grandmother believed some truths must stay close to the heart. A murmur moved through the room. Eleanor Reeves leaned forward. May I see those? Mila handed them over. Eleanor read slowly. Her face changed, not with shock but recognition. This is my brother's handwriting, Eleanor said at last. Lydia stiffened. Mother? He promised her the store, Eleanor continued. I remember the argument. I was young. I didn't understand why it mattered so much. She looked up at Mila. Your grandmother was right to fight. The room fell silent. That doesn't mean this needs to be public, Lydia said quickly. We can acknowledge it privately. Make amends, quietly. Mila met her gaze. Quiet amends still leave questions unanswered. Ethan spoke. And silence implies guilt. Lydia's voice tightened. And publicity implies scandal. Mila took a breath. Only if dignity is absent. Eleanor folded the papers carefully. This family foundation exists to preserve literacy, honesty, and community, she said. If we hide this, we betray our own mission. Lydia's composure cracked just slightly. You'd risk everything for her? Eleanor looked at Mila. For the truth. A small victory settled into the room. Not loud, not triumphant, but real. Lunch was served then, almost awkwardly. Soup again, always soup. Mila accepted the bowl, hands steady, sharing the simple meal among people whose lives were tied together by history, whether they liked it or not. Eleanor turned to Mila. "Your grandmother, did she ever regret fighting us?" Mila shook her head. She regretted how lonely it was, but she never regretted standing. Eleanor nodded, eyes bright. "I wish I'd known her." "So do I," Mila said softly. After the meeting, as they stepped into the marble hallway, Lydia caught up to Mila. "You've won this round," Lydia said, voice low. Mila shook her head. "This wasn't a game." Lydia studied her, something like exhaustion replacing arrogance. "Be careful. Public sympathy shifts." Mila smiled gently. "So does power." Outside, Ethan exhaled as if releasing a breath he'd held for years. "That went better than expected," he said. "It isn't over," Mila replied. "No," he agreed, "but we're closer." They walked to a nearby cafe, quiet, sunlit, mercifully ordinary. They shared a sandwich, laughed softly when Ethan spilled a bit of soup on his sleeve. "Oh, I guess soup really is our symbol now," he said. Mila smiled. Humble things often are. As they stood to leave, Ethan's phone buzzed again. He read the message, his expression shifting. "What is it?" Mila asked. "The Foundation agreed to release a statement," he said. "Full acknowledgement." Relief washed through her. "But," he added, "the press wants a face. A story. They want you." Mila's smile faded. "And Lydia?" she asked. "She's already scheduled her own interview," Ethan said quietly. "For tonight." Mila's hand went instinctively to her locket, because the truth was finally standing tall, and now it was about to be tested in public. The studio lights were warmer than Mila expected. Not harsh, not interrogating, just bright enough to remind her that nothing said here could be taken back. She sat on a simple chair, hands folded in her lap, the silver locket resting plainly against her dark blouse. No glamour, no armor, just herself. Across the small set, the interviewer adjusted her notes, offering a reassuring smile. "Thank you for agreeing to speak with us, Mila." Mila nodded. "Thank you for asking me directly." Behind the cameras, Ethan stood near the wall, not hovering, not distant, present in the way that mattered. When she'd hesitated earlier, he hadn't pushed. He'd only said, "Whatever you choose, make sure it sounds like you." Earlier that evening, they'd shared a quiet meal in his kitchen. Roasted vegetables, bread torn by hand, a single candle between them. "Eat," he'd said again, smiling gently. "Courage burns energy." She'd laughed, then grown serious. "What if I say the wrong thing?" "Then you'll correct it," he replied. That's the privilege of honesty. Now the red light blinked on. "We're joined tonight by Mila Ashford," the interviewer began, "whose name has become unexpectedly familiar following a New Year's Eve gala and a resurfaced family dispute." Mila breathed in slowly. "Ms. Ashford," the interviewer continued, and many people are curious. Why speak now?" Mila lifted her gaze to the camera. "Because silence was never meant to protect lies." The interviewer nodded, inviting her to continue. "My grandmother taught me that dignity doesn't shout," Mila said, "but it also doesn't hide. The story being discussed isn't about scandal. It's about a promise kept, eventually, and the cost of waiting for fairness." She touched the locket lightly. This belonged to her. Inside are copies of letters and agreements she carried for years because she believed memory mattered, not to shame anyone, to remember the truth. The interviewer leaned forward slightly. "Some have said this story damages a respected family." Mila didn't flinch. "Truth doesn't damage. Avoidance does." In another studio across town, Lydia Reeves adjusted her blazer, lips pressed into a practiced smile as her own interview began. "We acknowledge a disagreement from decades ago," Lydia said smoothly, "but it's being exaggerated for attention." Back in Mila's studio, the interviewer asked, "What could you want now, Mila?" The question landed heavier than the rest. Mila thought of the bookstore, of her grandmother's hands, of the years spent quietly restoring other people's stories. "I want closure," she said. "And I want people to understand that ordinary lives carry extraordinary integrity." The interviewer smiled. "Thank you." The red light dimmed. Ethan crossed the room then, handing Mila a cup of tea he'd somehow acquired backstage. "You were perfect," he said softly. She shook her head. "I was honest." They watched the broadcast later from his living room. Soup warming on the stove, a ritual now impossible to ignore. Lydia's interview followed Mila's. The contrast was stark. Where Mila had spoken slowly, Lydia spoke swiftly. Where Mila had grounded her story in memory, Lydia framed hers in strategy. And viewers noticed. Social media shifted, not explosively, but decisively. Comments softened. Questions sharpened toward Lydia. Instead, Ethan's phone buzzed repeatedly. "The foundation statement is live," he said. "And my mother just called." Mila's heart skipped. "What did she say?" He smiled, something tender in his eyes. "She thanked you." They sat together, bowls of soup in hand, the city lights glowing beyond the windows. For the first time in days, Mila felt something settle. Not relief, exactly. Alignment. Ethan turned to her. "There's one more thing." She looked up. "That sounds ominous." He smiled. "Only a little." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small envelope. Inside was a key, old brass, worn smooth. "This was found in the Foundation archives," he said. "Your grandmother's bookstore. It's been closed for years. The board voted today." Mila's breath caught. "Voted for what?" "To restore it," Ethan said, "as a community space, in her name." Tears filled her eyes. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say yes," he replied gently, "and maybe stay." She laughed softly through the emotion. "Stay?" "With me," he said. Not dramatic, just clear. She met his gaze, heart steady, certain. Yes. They leaned into each other then, not rushed, not hidden, foreheads touching. The weight of weeks easing between them. Ethan brushed his thumb over the locket. "Some objects really do choose their moment." Mila smiled. "So do people." As the night deepened, one final notification lit Ethan's phone. He glanced at it, expression tightening just slightly. "What is it?" Mila asked. He hesitated, then showed her. A headline, freshly posted, "Breaking Lydia Reeves, announces legal review of Foundation decision." Mila exhaled slowly. Outside, the city hummed. The truth had spoken, but it wasn't done being answered. The legal review never became the storm Lydia had hoped for. It arrived quietly, wrapped in formal language and cautious statements, and unraveled just as quietly when facts refused to bend. Documents spoke. Witnesses remembered. Time, patient and exacting, did what it always did when given room. Mila stood in the doorway of the old bookstore for the first time on a clear spring morning. Sunlight spilling across dusty shelves and worn wooden floors. The sign above the door had been restored with care. Ashford Books. EST. By promise, she pressed her palm to the doorframe, emotion rising unexpectedly fast. This wasn't triumph. It was completion. Ethan stood beside her, holding 2 cups of coffee from the cafe down the street. Simple. Unadorned, perfect. "Ready?" he asked. She nodded. Inside, volunteers moved gently, setting up chairs, stacking donated books, arranging flowers near the front window. Mrs. Alvarez waved enthusiastically from a corner, already telling a story to anyone who would listen. Mila laughed softly. "She's claimed the place." "She's earned it," Ethan replied. They found a small table near the back, sharing their coffee and a plate of pastries someone had brought for luck. The familiar ritual felt like a quiet promise kept. "You know," Ethan said, stirring his cup, "Lydia withdrew the review this morning." Mila didn't look surprised. She knew when to stop. She also sent a note, he added. Mila raised an eyebrow. An apology? An acknowledgement, Ethan said. From her, that's significant, Mila smiled. Closure comes in many forms. Later that afternoon, the small opening ceremony began. Nothing grand, just neighbors, students, readers, and a few reporters who seemed more interested in the shelves than the scandal. Ethan stood off to the side as Mila spoke, briefly, plainly. This place exists because someone believed quiet work mattered, Mila said. My grandmother believed stories deserved care, not ownership. I hope this space honors that. Applause followed, warm, unforced. As the crowd drifted into conversation, Ethan joined her again, slipping something into her hand. The locket. She laughed softly. You still think I'll lose it? No, he said. I think it belongs here now. They placed it gently in a small glass case near the register. Alongside a photograph of her grandmother, the locket caught the light. Silver and steady. That evening, they walked home together, city calm around them. No whispers, no headlines. Just the sound of their steps and the distant hum of life continuing. At Ethan's door, he paused. There's something I want to do, he said. She tilted her head. That sounds deliberate. It is. He took her hands. Eyes clear, voice certain. This year started with a mistake that wasn't one. Since then, you've chosen courage every day. I don't want a quiet understanding or a temporary promise. He reached into his pocket, not dramatically, just honestly, and held out a small velvet box. Mila Ashford, he said. Will you choose this life with me, openly, steadily, with all its ordinary meals and hard truths? Her breath caught, but her answer didn't waver. Yes, she said, with intention. He slipped the ring onto her finger. Simple, elegant, real. They didn't rush inside. They stood there for a moment, letting the night witness what no audience needed to approve. A few weeks later, the bell above the bookstore door rang once, not to announce customers, not to signal business, only to break the quiet. The old wooden door stood open, letting late afternoon light spill across restored shelves and polished floors, worn smooth by decades of footsteps. The books stood quietly, patient witnesses to lives once opened and closed within their pages. There was no aisle runner, no dramatic music, only the soft sound of chairs being shifted, a few quiet coughs, the unmistakable sniffle of Mrs. Alvarez, already crying without apology. Mila Ashford paused just outside the doorway. She took a breath. The scent inside was familiar. Paper, wood, tea steeping somewhere in the back. A scent that never tried to impress, a scent that stayed. She wore an ivory dress, simple and unembellished, its beauty in its restraint. Her hair was pinned back with gentle care. Nothing shimmered unnecessarily. Nothing asked for approval. Around her neck, resting against her heart for one final time, hung the silver locket. Not for courage now, for remembrance. When she stepped inside, there was no hush of expectation, only warmth. People smiled. Someone reached for a tissue. Someone else squeezed a neighbor's hand. Ethan stood waiting near the center of the bookstore. No raised platform, no authority in his stance, just presence. He wore a light suit that felt more at home among books than boardrooms. When he saw her, his breath caught, not with surprise, but recognition, as if this moment had been quietly arriving for a long time. Mila walked toward him, steady and unhurried. Every step felt earned. When she reached him, Ethan smiled, not the confident smile the world knew, but the one reserved for truth, the one that softened his eyes. "You're here," he said quietly. "I am," she replied. They turned together toward the small gathering. No officiant stood between them. Only a woman from the Community Literacy Council, someone who had known Mila's grandmother, stepped forward with a folded page and a gentle voice. "We're here," she said, "because two people chose honesty when silence would have been easier, and love when distance would have been safer." A pause. "Mila," she continued, "do you choose Ethan, not as an escape, but as a partner, in ordinary days, difficult truths, shared meals, and a life built openly?" Mila looked at Ethan. She didn't rush her answer. "I choose him," she said clearly, with intention. A breath moved through the room. "Ethan," the woman said, "do you choose Mila, not as a moment, but as a life, with respect, steadiness, and commitment that doesn't waver when watched?" Ethan's voice didn't shake. "I choose her," he said, "every day." There were no dramatic vows, no promises too big to keep, only truth. Ethan reached for Mila's hands. As he did, she unclasped the chain from her neck and held the locket for a moment between them. "This carried the past," she said softly. "It doesn't need to anymore." Together they walked to the small glass case near the front counter. Inside rested a photograph of her grandmother, smiling in front of the original bookstore. Mila placed the locket beside it. A chapter closed. When they turned back, the woman smiled. Then, by the power of choice and witness, "You are married." Applause filled the space. Warm, unforced, full. Mrs. Alvarez cried openly and hugged a stranger. Someone laughed through tears. Ethan kissed Mila, gently. Briefly, not for spectacle, but for certainty. Later, there was food. Of course there was. Soup was served in simple bowls. Bread passed hand to hand. Someone had baked a cake slightly uneven on one side, which Mila declared perfect. They sat on mismatched chairs, laughing easily. No speeches, no spotlight. Lydia arrived quietly. She stayed near the back at first, watching. When she approached Mila, her expression held no sharpness, only something like fatigue softened by acceptance. "I wish," Lydia said carefully, "that things had been handled better long ago." Mila nodded. "So do I." Lydia handed her a wrapped book. Inside was a first edition novel, its pages yellowed with age. "For the shelf that matters," Lydia said. Mila smiled. "Thank you." Lydia didn't stay long, but she stayed long enough. As evening settled, the guests drifted away slowly, reluctant, content. When the bookstore finally emptied, Mila and Ethan stood alone among the shelves. "We should lock up," Ethan said. Mila shook her head. "Not yet." They stood together in the quiet. No headlines, no accusations, no countdown clocks, just two people where they had chosen to be. Outside, the city hummed, indifferent, alive, moving forward. Inside, a story rested. And for the first time in a very long while, it didn't need defending. The end. Some stories don't end when the truth is told. They end when love is chosen, clearly, openly, and without fear. So tell me, what would you have chosen? Silence, or a life lived honestly? If this story touched you, please like, comment, subscribe, and rate it from 0 to 10. Your voice is part of the story too. See you in the next one.